Brakati Yahweh, Brakati Yahushai, Brakati Yahweh, Brakati Yahushai, Brakati Yahweh, Brakati Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bahashim Chakadash. The bonds to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone drew well. Salutations to the hopefully elect that day. You Akim to Zadakim that did this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity. I'm the priest Shimon. This week's topic is going to be going into Iran shutting the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, this is something that I've been saying for a while. In fact, I had checked the videos I did on this channel, and in 2019 I did a lesson, 4 reasons why Iran would lose. Well, it was a response. Really, it was a response video to RT, which RT at the time was on YouTube. They're not on YouTube anymore. But 4 reasons why Iran would lose to the US. And in that lesson, one of the things I brought out was the Strait of Hormuz, right? And the fact that, Iran is not like Iraq. You can't just throw boots on the ground over there and stuff like that. But the Strait of Hormuz is great leverage because, they block the strait, and that's like, I believe it's 25% of the liquid natural gas and 30% of the world's crude oil. It's a very important place, and shutting the strait definitely affects China, but China does have pipelines running to Russia. Can Russia accommodate for China? I don't know, man. I don't think they're gonna feel it that much, but I think the main people that's gonna feel that, the main nation that's gonna feel that is Europe. Europe is gonna feel that a lot. They shut down the strait. They already have 2 huge tankers that did an about face. So, hey man, this is big implications. Does that mean Europe try to start sourcing oil from the United States? Is it some 4D chess? Who the fuck knows? But, the people of Iran are retaliating. They're not taking this standing down. You saw what they did to Israel. They have hypersonic missiles, the Fatah 1, the Fatah 2, and it's just getting through, all right? Israeli defense systems, the Israeli defense system, they have the Iron Dome, which is very well known. It's not the best of some of the defense system they have, because they have like the Arrow 1, Arrow 2, David Sling. But these missile defense systems, they can't combat hypersonic missiles, because hypersonic missiles, as again, something I've been saying for a long time, the way missile interception work, you got to think about trying to shoot a bullet with another bullet, which is already hard itself. It's a very expensive thing to do, all right, especially when you're dealing with missiles. But then trying to shoot a bullet that could curve, then it's just like damn near impossible. So these hypersonic missiles, which don't have necessarily predetermined paths, all right, again through these missile defense systems, and they're also shooting cruise missiles, so they're just pretty much overwhelmed. Another thing to consider is Iran is damn near 70 times larger than Israel. Israel needs the United States. And Trump, I guess not to look weak, did bust a bunch of bombs on one of Iran's nuclear facilities, the entrance and the exits. But that really crippled the whole MAGA movement, divided it, because it's like, look, you ran on being a conservative, not anti-war individual. Did Trump hit Iran, killed Soleimani? Yeah, but that's like a surgical thing. The last thing they want, all right, is to be a lot of the MAGA movement want us to be dragged into war. So we've seen a lot of people that voted for Trump that have platforms like Candace Owens, Dick Fuentes, Myron Gaines, and these sorts of individuals, these celebrity truthers that are just like, they're regretting voting for Trump because he's grabbing his ankles for Israel, which if they did any due diligence, that wouldn't have surprised them. This guy's a pro-Zionist. Like I said, if you've been following these lessons, these are things we bring out. But ultimately, again, this is the Most High turning the gears of war. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 15, verse 3. And it says, Exodus 15 and 3 says, the Lord, Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, is a man of war. He's a man, okay? God is not a woman. Lord is a man, and he's a man of war, okay? The Lord is his name. Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai is his name. He's the one that's mustering these different tensions and things you see going on in the world, all right? Now, we know at some point this thing has to de-escalate, because it can escalate to World War III. And let me prove that real quick. This is the book of 2nd Ezra, prophecies. Hold on. It's the second Ezra, the 4th chapter. Bear with me, because I didn't have it here. I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, second Ezra, the 4th chapter. Boom. Okay, so this is the book of second Ezra, chapter 4 and 37. It says, by measure hath he measured the times, and by number hath he numbered the times, and he doth not move nor stir them until said measure is fulfilled. So World War III, in terms of precedence, it can't supersede the chip. All right, the chip has to come. The chip mandate has to come, and they're working towards that. This whole transhumanism movement, all these different companies and shit like that, and Neuralink and stuff. So they're moving towards a chip. Stablecoin is moving forward. You know, tokenizing pretty much all currency. So these things are happening. All right, but what's happening over here in the Middle East is also very huge in terms of prophecy. So we're just seeing a lot of staging going on by the Heavenly Father. All right, but at some point, all right, they have to, I don't know, somebody has to fold. Something has to be done. Some deal has to be brokered, because they cannot escalate all the way to World War III. And Iran keeps hitting the shit out of Israel. Now, Iran, to be fair, that deal they did back with Barack Obama, the original nuclear deal they did in 2015, before Trump came in his office and ripped it up, they were abiding by that shit, you know? They were abiding by it. That's how come they was coming out saying, look, Iran doesn't have nukes, because they had people inspect, and they didn't enrich uranium to the point where they should have nuclear weapons. But Israel kept pulling teeth, and, you know, Trump, being the Zionist he is, just ripped that shit up. Now you have this conflict going on, you know. Now the Strait of Hormuz, you know, you cutting off that should send oil prices skyrocketing, you know. However, you know, oil futures, it did spike on the news, but then it kind of went back down, you know. Again, these things wouldn't affect us so much in the United States, because, you know, the United States doesn't need oil. The United States sells oil. Bunch of oil here. Like I said, that's going to really affect Europe, and it's going to build up the tension and the hatred between Europe and America. This is the book of Revelation chapter 17 verse 16. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. NATO, the EU, they're going to hate America. You know, America's going to keep doing things, because America is clearly loyal to Israel, right? But they're not 100% loyal to NATO and the EU. See, it says, these shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate. How? Thermonuclear destruction. Okay. When World War III happens, it's going to be the war to end all wars. It says, and naked. It says, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Right, burn her with fire. So we're seeing other nations stepping in, because you know, this affects the world, man. You see China step in, calling for a resolution. Russia, you know. Speaking of Russia, the book of Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, the 7th verse says, be thou prepared, and prepare thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Right, so this Ezekiel 38th chapter, you know, going into the relationship between the Persians and the Medes, right? The Persians being the Iranians, and the Medes is where the land of Russia would be, in that same spirit, that alliance is there. So they're sticking them for Iran. Remember, Vladimir Putin was quoted as saying, who gave NATO the right to kill Gaddafi? You see? And a high Russian official, I forgot his name, you know, they have these crazy names, it says, look, we're ready to arm Iran with nuclear weapons, which, this is the weak saying, I'm strong. Iran does not have to hold these nuclear weapons, just be allied with those who do have them. And once you have hypersonic missiles, who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? Once you have hypersonic missiles and you can put a nuclear warhead, who gives a shit if it's in Iran or not? You know? Don't you know that the United States have hypersonic missiles that could launch from the United States and go to China in 18 minutes? So why the fuck, if Iran is allied with Russia, who has a hypersonic, who has nuclear capabilities. Why do they need to have them in Iran? These things are called intercontinental ballistic missiles, man. And by the way, Iran, the Fatah 1 and the Fatah 2, those hypersonic missiles, when we say hypersonic, we're talking about anything that could go above Mach 5. Iran makes those. So, which is more than enough to do damage to their number one enemy, Israel, right? So they have other things they could leverage, Verse 8 says, after many days thou shalt be visited in the latter years, Salakia, thou shalt come into the land that is, actually I'm good on that. Let me jump to Obadiah 1, I believe it's 7. This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 7. It says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee. Right, so the nations that were once allied with America are deceiving you, okay? Because they're going to do backdoor deals, okay? It says, have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. It says, they that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. Eating thy bread is, in the ancient world, the covenant of bread and salt. Breaking bread, as break bread, all that, Jake slang, but it really means to make a covenant with somebody. In modern day times, contracts, different alliances and all that, that's going to be broken up. That's what the scriptures are saying. They're not gonna hold on to that. See? And that's the time we're coming in. That's the time we're approaching. See, the Spirit of the Lord got us prophesying these things, and it's exciting times because we're seeing this come to pass. And you have a lot of these truthers, if you will, your Scott Ritter and your Scott Horton and your Ryan Dawsons and your these different individuals that have been speaking on the situation in the Middle East for years, all right, are now finally get some sort of more attention. And as time progresses, the Most High is going to reveal more and more. So a lot of the stuff that we're prophesying comes to pass because it already happened already. Most High declared the end from the beginning, right? It says, have prevailed against thee. Because look, in this World War III thing that's going to happen, Russia is going to come out on top. Russia is going to be the one that's going to be leading the charge against Yahweh Shai, not America. America's they're not going to, after they get hit by the missiles and the laser beams, all right, they're going to be done. Okay? They're going to be done with. It's going to be Russia leading that charge. Why? Revelations, the 13th chapter, the feet of it was like a bear. You see? So the Most High is going to be coming in the midst of the fire. America is going to be wiped out. These nations are going to be unified under following Russia, all right, to fight against Yahweh Shai. That's what's going to happen. It says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. So that's that major wound. That's Zechariah 14 and 12 you read about, man. In fact, let me close out with that. Let me close out with that Zechariah, man. They're going to backstab America, man. That's what's going to happen. Zechariah 14 and 12 says, and this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a people before it's a place. That's one. Okay? Pardon me? So that people is the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And all these nations have fought against us. How do we know that? Psalms the 83rd chapter. When you go to Psalms the 83rd chapter, it goes into all our enemies, and it starts with who? So-called white man, Esau, Edom. they've had our way with us, man, but, you know, it's our fault. You know, we want to horn after all these different idols and not worshiping Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, so you know what? You want to worship in these nations' idols? I'm going to fucking have you under their thumb. And that's what the Lord did. It didn't matter if you had righteous brothers amongst that lot that didn't do all that. You know, the Lord judges as a whole. He judges the nations as a whole. You know? It says, their flesh shall consume away while they stand. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Okay, so this is physically going to happen to them. Think Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the Sarah Connor scene. Also, their eyes is their visions for the future, and the tongue consuming away is the lies and bullshit that they prescribe throughout the world. You see? So that's the great day that's coming. That's what all this thing is being set up for. All right? Exciting times, man. As to how this de-escalates, I'm not sure. This is something we just have to wait and see. Just taking it day by day, and just, you know, whatever comes out, we prophesy on. With that, we're going to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rachal Kodash. The belongs to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone Truth Well. Salutations to the hopeful elect out there. You Akim to Zadakim that do this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity. Shalom.